Jerome James, from shot blocker to conman Jerome, James was never an NBA superstar. But during his career, he was a reliable defensive presence, a big man who knew how to protect the rim and hustle for every rebound. Known for his shot skills, James had a journeyman's career, playing for several teams, including the Seattle Supersonics and New York Knicks. Fans respected his grit, and his on-court hustle earned him a modest place in NBA history. However, after retiring, James' life took a troubling turn that few saw coming. Far from the courts and cheering crowds, James became embroiled in a series of fraudulent activities that painted a stark contrast to his hard-working basketball image. The trouble began when James got involved in a real estate scam that preyed on unsuspecting investors and homebuyers. Posing as a legitimate investor and consultant, he promised high returns and quick deals, often persuading people to hand over large sums of money up front. But instead of delivering on those promises, James allegedly used the funds for personal expenses and left. Clients in financial ruin, authorities started to investigate after multiple complaints surfaced. And in 2021, James was formally charged with wire fraud and investment fraud. The court documents revealed a tangled web of deceit, where James manipulated trust and goodwill, something he likely honed during his days as a team player, but now used for personal gain rather than teamwork. Adding salt to the wound, several former NBA acquaintances expressed their disappointment publicly, noting how James' fall from grace reflected poorly not only on him, but on former players trying to stay on the right path post-retirement. The transition from professional athlete to businessman is never easy, but James' choice to exploit others for money was a betrayal of the values basketball is supposed to teach. In addition to the legal consequences, including hefty fines and potential jail time, James' reputation suffered irreparably. Social media commentators and former fans debated how a player once celebrated for his defensive hustle could end up as a con artist. James' story serves as a warning. Talent on the court doesn't always translate to integrity off it. The skills to bluff defenders don't justify bluffs to defraud investors. The NBA community continues to wrestle with how to better prepare players for life after basketball to avoid such tragic declines. For James, the shot-blocking highlight reels may still exist, but his post-career legacy is now a cautionary tale about how easily trust can be broken and lives damaged when temptation wins out. Ruben Patterson, the Kobe stopper, and everything else you don't want to stop. Ruben Patterson fancied himself the Kobe stopper, the guy who'd shut down one of the fiercest scorers the NBA has ever seen. Spoiler alert, Kobe Bryant dropped 42 points on him that night. And that might have been the least embarrassing thing Ruben ever did in his life. On the court, Patterson was known as a gritty, physical defender, a throwback to the kind of tough-as-nails guard who doesn't shy away from banging elbows and roughing up opponents. Coaches loved to stick him on their opponents' best players to disrupt rhythm. Fans, they mostly remembered his stubborn style. But Patterson's real legacy would become something far darker than any highlight reel. His off-court problems began in 2000 and quickly piled up. After a night out partying, Ruben was involved in a violent incident that saw him break a man's jaw outside a nightclub. The NBA's disciplinary response, a 3-game suspension, and some community service. Yep, just 3 games. Because apparently, if you shatter someone's face, you only miss a week of hoops. But it got worse. That very same year, Ruben was accused of forcing his nanny into a sexual act, a horrifying allegation that culminated in him pleading guilty to attempted third-degree rape. He served 15 days in jail and was officially registered as a sex offender. Not the kind of reputation that translates to post-career endorsements or charity work. If that wasn't enough, Patterson's legal troubles didn't stop. In 2002, he faced an arrest for domestic assault, though the charges were eventually dropped. Fast forward to 2007, and he was arrested for driving under the influence. And if you thought the nightmare was over, in 2019, the man was back in the news, owing more than $100,000 in unpaid child support, a far cry from the days when he was the Kobe stopper on the hardwood. What's truly tragic is how Patterson's promising career and gritty defensive reputation got completely overshadowed by a cascade of criminal behavior and poor decisions. He's a cautionary tale of how off-court demons can completely ruin a legacy. No matter how tough you play on the court, Glenn "Big Baby" Davis, from hardwood hero to federal felon Glenn Davis, affectionately nicknamed Big Baby for his towering size and surprisingly gentle demeanor, was a beloved figure during his NBA championship run with the Boston Celtics. Fans admired his hustle and heart. Teammates loved his presence. He was that lovable giant everyone rooted for. But behind that soft nickname lay a story that darkened faster than a half-forgotten cup of coffee left on the court sidelines. In February 2018, police stormed a hotel room where Davis was staying and uncovered over 120 grams of marijuana, nearly $100,000 in cash, and drug paraphernalia. 7 drug possession charges quickly followed, putting the former champ under a cloud of suspicion and legal peril. While he managed to dodge jail time by paying a hefty $15,000 fine and having the charges dropped, this was just the opening act of a much darker saga. By October 2021, Davis was implicated in a healthcare fraud scheme targeting the NBA's own health plan. That's right, the same system designed to protect players from medical hardships became the victim of a sophisticated scam. Davis, along with others, submitted false claims, siphoning money illegally. The feds weren't messing around. In November 2023, Davis was convicted and sentenced to 40 months in federal prison, ordered to pay restitution, and face supervised release. From hardwood hero lifting trophies to federal felon behind bars, the fall of Big Baby Davis is a brutal reminder that the toughest shots sometimes come off the court. The man who once inspired fans with his grit and charm is now a cautionary tale about how quickly a legacy can be shredded by poor choices and greed. Rasheed Bird, a career and life marked by darkness. Rasheed Bird's name barely rings a bell in NBA circles, not because of his basketball skill, his career was brief and unremarkable, but because of the horrifying path his life took after stepping off the court, standing tall with the potential of a future star. Bird's story took a nightmarish turn when, in March 2024, he was sentenced to 90 years to life in prison for a series of violent sexual assaults. This wasn't an isolated incident. Bird had a documented criminal history dating back years, including arrests in 2005 and 2010 for sexual assault. He exploited his fleeting status as an athlete to lure victims in abuse of power that, sadly, history has seen too many times. The grim crescendo came after a 2019 assault accusation led to his 2020 arrest, followed by a painstaking investigation and sky-high bail. Bird's basketball aspirations are now just a footnote. Drowned in the headlines of his appalling crimes, his story serves as a bleak reminder that fame and physical prowess provide no immunity from accountability, that the darkest human impulses can destroy everything. No matter the arena, Reggie Harding, the trailblazer whose light burned out too soon. Reggie Harding's name might not pop up in casual NBA convos, but the man was a pioneer, the first player ever drafted straight out of high school into the NBA, way back in 1962. Imagine that, a 17-year-old kid skipping college and jumping straight into the big leagues. Today, that's standard practice. But Harding was the original rebel blazing a path no one else dared to walk. Yet, the story of Reggie Harding is more tragedy than triumph. His prodigious talent on the court was constantly overshadowed by an off-court life spiraling into chaos. Multiple arrests plagued him. Charges ranged from statutory rape to assaulting a police officer, serious offenses that painted a grim picture behind his athletic promise. His NBA career itself was uneven, affected by suspensions and bans for breaking league rules and fighting. Instead of making headlines for highlight dunks or clutch shots, Harding made them for trouble. By the time his brief career fizzled, he was already a cautionary tale. The darkest chapter came when, at just 30 years old, Harding was murdered, his life violently cut short in 1978. His death was never fully explained, wrapped in the shadowy world that often ensnares athletes who fall off the grid. Reggie Harding's story is one of shattered potential and the heavy price paid when personal demons collide with public expectations. He was the NBA's first high school phenom, a title that now carries a bittersweet aftertaste. His life reminds us that talent alone isn't enough. Sometimes, the hardest battles happen off the court. Byron Houston, from rising star to prison cells. Byron Houston was a promising talent coming out of Oklahoma State, a powerhouse in college hoops who briefly made it to the NBA and overseas leagues. On the court, Houston looked like a man who could turn things around and carve a respectable career. But his post-basketball life quickly turned into a troubling saga of legal woes and personal struggles. Houston's trouble started small but escalated dramatically. He was repeatedly charged with indecent exposure, an offense that left him branded as a sex offender. Those charges weren't isolated incidents. They spanned several years and led to increased scrutiny and public disgrace. In 2007, Houston's legal troubles culminated when he was arrested for public indecency, violating his probation, and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Despite his lawyers pointing to mental health issues, depression, and possible compulsive behaviors, the court prioritized punishment over treatment. The basketball world that once cheered him on watched in silence as Byron Houston's life crumbled into a cautionary tale. His case starkly highlights how mental health issues and untreated personal problems can derail even the most promising athletes. Houston's story isn't just about criminal acts, it's about a man struggling to cope, but failing to get the help he desperately needed. The lesson: talent and fame offer no shield against personal demons. Steve Francis. The franchise in free falls, Steve Francis, once affectionately dubbed the franchise, lit up NBA arenas with jaw-dropping athleticism, clutch performances, and a flashy style that made him a fan favorite. Drafted second overall in 1999, he seemed destined for superstardom, but the Boston by years have been, to put it mildly, rough. Francis's legal troubles began surfacing publicly around 2016. In June of that year, he was arrested for burglary, caught stealing over $7,000 worth of items. This was no isolated incident of youthful mischief. It marked a troubling pattern of behavior that shocked many, who remembered his glory days. His brushes with the law didn't end there. Francis also faced DUI charges and incidents of public intoxication, openly admitting to a long-standing battle with alcohol abuse. He confessed that the pressures of life after basketball contributed to his downward spiral, something many former athletes struggle with but few talk about candidly. Francis's story is a stark reminder that fame and success don't inoculate you from hardship. The fall from the franchise to repeated legal troubles paints a somber picture of how the post-career void can lead to self-destructive behavior. Despite the setbacks, Francis has shown moments of reflection and openness about his struggles, which makes his story both a warning and a potential inspiration for those fighting similar battles. Robert W.H.Y. from NBA prospect to repeat offender Robert Y. drafted by the Utah Jazz in 2005, had all the makings of an NBA journeyman with the skills to stick around. However, his basketball dreams were derailed by a cascade of criminal behavior. That turned him into more of a cautionary headline than a sports star. Y's criminal record began to pile up quickly. In 2008, he was convicted for running a drug house's serious felony that involved trafficking and drug-related offenses. After going on the lam, he was finally arrested in 2010 and served 2 years behind bars. If that weren't enough, in 2015, Y was caught up in a hotel burglary case, landing him back in jail. This pattern of crime made clear that Y's life outside basketball was unraveling fast. His story is a textbook example of how promising talent can be overshadowed by poor decisions and the failure to adapt to life beyond the court. It also raises uncomfortable questions about the support systems or lack thereof in place for athletes facing tough transitions. Kermit Washington, from NBA All-Star to charity fraud felon Kermit Washington, was once a formidable presence on the court, an NBA All-Star known for his gritty defense and physical play, especially remembered for the infamous punch incident in 1977. But years after retiring, Washington's name resurfaced for far less honorable reasons, a story of greed, betrayal, and shattered trust. In 2018, Washington was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison after being convicted of embezzling nearly $1 million from his own charity, the Sixth Man Foundation. The foundation was supposed to help HIV-positive children in Africa, because that naturally attracted generous donors and goodwill. Instead, Washington siphoned off the funds for personal luxuries, turning a noble mission into a personal piggy bank. But his fraud didn't stop there. Washington also engaged in an illegal referral scheme, funneling illicit payments and avoiding taxes, which compounded his legal woes. His fall from grace was as steep as it was public, transforming a man who once inspired hope on the court into a symbol of betrayal and corruption. Washington's story is a grim reminder that fame and good intentions don't automatically translate into integrity. His actions not only cost him freedom, but tarnished the legacy of what could have been meaningful philanthropy. Tate George Clutch. Hero to convicted fraudster, Tate George's basketball career may not have reached NBA superstardom, but he carved out a respectable name for himself in college and brief professional stints. His legendary buzzer beater in the 1990 NCAA tournament lives on in highlight reels. Moment of pure magic. Unfortunately, George's post-basketball life was far from a fairy tale. He went on to found a real estate investment company that promised to manage over $500 million in assets, luring investors, including some NBA players, with glossy presentations and lofty claims. Behind the scenes, the firm was running a complex wire fraud scheme, duping investors by inflating asset values and fabricating returns. When the truth came out, it left a trail of financial devastation and broken trust. In 2013, George was convicted and sentenced to 9 years in federal prison, a harsh but deserved punishment for his crimes. His story serves as a powerful cautionary tale of how unchecked ambition and greed can erase years of respect earned on the court. The fall of Tate George underscores the dangers of getting swept up in schemes promising quick riches and reminds us that a flashy shot on the hardwood doesn't guarantee honesty off it. Alan Anderson, from court hustler to health plan, fraudster Lone Anderson's basketball career might have flown under the radar compared to bigger NBA names. But his post-career missteps certainly caught public attention for all the wrong reasons. Between 2017 and 2019, Anderson was caught in a federal investigation for submitting fake medical claims to the NBA's health plan, amounting to roughly $121,000 in fraudulent payouts. This wasn't a simple mistake or misunderstanding. It was part of a larger $4 million fraud scheme that involved multiple former NBA players and associates. In 2023, Anderson was sentenced to 24 months in prison for his role in the scheme, facing not only incarceration, but also significant restitution payments. What makes Anderson's story especially tragic is the clear shift from being a professional athlete, a figure admired for skill and discipline, to becoming embroiled in criminal activity that damages the very community that once supported him. His case is a sobering reminder that the temptation to cheat can strike anyone, regardless of past glory, and that the consequences are unforgiving. Antoine Walker, champion gambler and redeemed mentor. Antoine Walker's story is one of the most compelling cautionary tales in NBA history. A 5-time All-Star and NBA champion, Walker earned over $18 million in his career, living large both on and off the court. But the flashy lifestyle caught up with him. In 2009, Walker was charged with writing bad checks connected to massive gambling debts, a public embarrassment for a former star. His financial troubles spiraled into bankruptcy, revealing debts totaling $12.7 million, a jaw-dropping figure that shocked fans and analysts alike. Unlike many athletes who fade into obscurity after such falls, Walker took a different path. He transformed his mistakes into lessons, dedicating himself to mentoring younger athletes about financial responsibility and the dangers of gambling addiction. Walker's candor about his struggles and willingness to educate others is both inspiring and necessary, offering a roadmap for how to turn personal disaster into meaningful change. His story balances tragedy and redemption, reminding us that even the brightest stars can fall, but they can also rise again. And there you have it, a lineup of NBA players who proved that retirement isn't always the happy ending we imagine. Sometimes the toughest opponent comes after the final buzzer. And sadly, some of these legends ended up losing the game off the court. From fraud and theft to serious criminal charges, these stories remind us that fame, fortune, and talent aren't foolproof shields against poor choices or personal demons. It's wild these guys had the world at their feet, millions in the bank, and fans cheering their every move, but somehow, a lot of them still managed to shoot themselves in the foot. The hardwood glory didn't save them from a very real fall from grace. Makes you wonder if the real MVP should be whoever manages to retire without a headline like these. But don't get me wrong, this isn't a basketball sucks rant. There are plenty of former players out there who've made smart moves, built second careers, and continue to inspire. It's just that when someone falls this hard, the story is too juicy not to tell. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the darker side of NBA retirements, smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss more stories that are as fascinating as they are cautionary. Also, I want to hear from you. Which case shocked you the most? Do you know about a former player whose post-NBA life deserves its own video? Drop your thoughts and suggestions in the comments below. Your idea might just be our next big video. Thanks for sticking around. And remember, true legends aren't just made by the highlights or the trophies. They're made by how you handle life when the crowd goes silent and the lights go off. Catch you next time, where we'll keep uncovering the wildest stories from the world of basketball.